So the beginning of my tattoo career started in Pekin, Illinois, the first FCI, first federal joint I saw. And it started with a bang because it also was the same time that I did probably one of the most controversial things I had ever done in the entirety of my prison sentence. Now, as a tattooist, you're going to tattoo pretty much anything and every idea anybody can come up with inside a prison, which includes political gang signs, gang imagery, just straight up the hand signs, numbers, letters, all that stuff. You're going to do it all, and some of it was cool, some of it was really interesting, some of it was kind of like, damn, like I always remember one I did for my boy Rico Sims out of Peoria. If you ever see this, Rico, you're my dog. But I did. It was like a zombie hand. It was a zombie hand coming out of a grave. It had a tombstone behind it, and the hand was throwing up forks. And on the tombstone, it said, "Gangsters never die." And it stretched from his wrist all the way to the upper part of his elbow, inside of his elbow. And that was really cool. I always remembered that. I was very proud of it. It looked like something that you could have got off the street. Big old thick fat lines, light shades, contrasts, and all that stuff. It was really cool. Then you got these crazy ass situations where somebody will come in and they don't want to represent no more. They don't want to get on count. They're not with the business anymore. It was cool on the streets, but in prison, if you're gonna bang, that means you got to get up close and personal. You got to get your hands dirty. You're gonna have to push the steel, which is an entirely different ball game when it comes to guys that are used to playing with firearms, shooting at each other from a distance and not aiming and shooting up in the air and all that stuff. To them, a lot of people, they feel like that's being gangster. That's them gang banging. That's them showing people they're down. But when it actually comes down to it, is you're gonna have to see somebody one on one and put that work in for real before you start getting everybody else's respect. And the feds, they're gonna want to see. They're gonna want to do that heart check. They're going to see. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. And when they get there and they see that, they experience it, they opt to not get on count. And a lot of them already have existing ink on them. Or, whatever the case may be. But there's been a handful of times where I've came back from rec and I got one of the shot callers for the GDs or the Vice Lords or the BDs or somebody standing next to my cell with some clearly cowed and defeated fucking man. And they're like, kind of motion me into my cell like, "Come on, man, let me holler at you real quick. Got some business for you." And I'm like, "All right, cool." So I step in and the guy steps in with him and he's just got his head down. Either they sit down immediately or they just stand there quietly. They don't say anything. And I look at the guy and they're like, "Look, he's gonna have you, put something over something he's got. It's a cover up. Write me your list." And I'll walk out. And they'll say something to the guy like, "Don't come out of here until that shit's covered up." And then the motherfucker will be like, they'll nod his head or they'll say, "Yes, sir," or I wouldn't dream of it," And a lot of the times they don't care. They don't care what they get put over it. It's just a matter of saving their ass, not getting fucking hands put on them. And I've done literally just a straight 8-ball without the 8, just a big old black fucking blotch right over the top of whatever they had. Some will go for something a little bit more, like they weren't just forced into the fucking cell by the scruff of their neck and told to fucking you know, put their manhood on the table, the chopping block, because that's essentially what it is. I've always, like I said, I've seen that a few times, and I think to myself, like, damn, I don't know, y'all motherfuckers are gonna have to kill me. You're not gonna fucking corner me down, and that's just, I guess, some people they're just smarter, clearly, after the fact. You got on count, you got the ink, you've been repping it. Now, I mean, I understand it now, but to start that a whole bit off like that, that's rough. That's super rough. But anyways, yeah, these guys, they get on, they get the ink done, they go off, they're left in peace, and I never see or hear nothing from them again. But how that all started, I guess first you got to hear about the particular that particular group of white boys that were there at that time, the ones that were actually wearing it, actively talking about it, actively getting the ink for it. The white supremacists. I'll always remember two of them for sure. One, his name was Mike Snellenberger, and he was a white boy. He was probably creeping up into his 50s, late 40s, something like that. And he was from California, and he did a lot of state time in California. So that's all you ever heard from this guy was California white boy politics, and they were superior in every way compared to what he had to, the unsavory lot that he was forced to break bread with here. Like, this is how he would talk. This is how he would talk to me about his brothers. And I'm just one of these, these lowly inferior races, but he was all buddy buddy with me, and that was something that I could never respect. I could never respect people that claim to be something that is clearly in direct opposition to me and what I am and what I stand for. But you got a soft spot for me, right? Like, I'm cool. I'm not one of them. I'm not like the rest. And so I see this two-facery where you'll sit there and talk about white power this and white power that, and oh yeah, brother. But when no one's looking, you'll have me take a sip of your coffee Cadillac because it's got all the good stuff in it. You just, I don't know, you're being friendly, or you want me to try a bowl of food that you made, this new recipe with the fucking fried rice and the fucking microwaves and all that. But you're not supposed to be letting me taste out of your spoonware, your sporkware, and your cups and your bowls. I'm not supposed to be able to come in and shake your hand and sit on your bed and all this stuff. I could never respect people that are sometimes with it. If you're going to be something, especially something that's extreme like that, be that 100% of the time. Not sometimes, not part-time, not when it's convenient, not when it doesn't involve you to fucking stand on business pretty much at every opportunity. Just when it makes you look good. Just when it's, pandering to this image that you are projecting, but when it comes time to protect it, it's not there. It's not there. So yeah, Mike, California Mike, he was something else. Then there was another one, and he was just at all times like, it's like he was one of them guys where everybody else would be walking to the showers in their flip-flops, but he'd go in his boots. Like, every opportunity, he act like he came from a pen. He had never been to a pen yet. He had been, first off, his name was Russell, right? Big Russell Holloway or something like that. He was a big white boy, goatee, bald head, all the usual. And he was from Iowa too. And he was always, He was always getting the latest tattoo work, and it was always some white imagery of some kind, and he was proud of it, always talking about it and stuff. But he was a tattooist and I was a tattooist, so he had a soft spot for me too. And same thing. In fact, I think they were cellies. I'm almost positive him and Mike were cellies. I mean, they were a match made in heaven for each other. They just sit there and stroke each other's egos and who's the most superior out of the two. I don't know, but anyways, they were always on it, always talking about it, acting like it was the fucking, that's how it was there. And it's like, no, it's not. It's really not. This is a sweet spot. Politics ain't bad. Politics are what you want to make of them. And to be honest, nobody was really on it like that. None of them were. None of them were really on it like that. They weren't doing nothing. They'd go out to their, I think they have their own little four-directional mound out there by the sweat lodge of some kind, and they go out there and they do their thing and stuff. It's cool. Everything was cool. And like I said, nobody really cared about what they were getting on put on them or what they were talking about or nothing like that. But there's one person that it rubbed the wrong way. And he was another tattooist, and his name was Bullet. Bullet would become my tattoo sensei, right? And what was great about that is Bullet was a one-eyed white supremacist. One of his eyes was like, it was like one-eyed. It was like cockeyed off to the side and stuff. One looked at you and it could see straight perfectly fine, but one, we could never tell if he was looking at us or not. We could never tell if he could even see out of it or not. But I think he told us at one point in time that he could kind of see some shadows and stuff. But if he was tattooing and you'd look at him and he'd be like, he's like talking about just floating the needle, and he'd be like drilling the fuck out of them. And it's like, dude, if you could perceive the depth the same as us, you would know that you're not floating the needle. You're jackhammering the sidewalk here. But he approached me one day, and he didn't teach me to tattoo, but he did approach me one day and said, hey, are you interested in jigging for me? Being a jigger, right? Looking out for the CO. And I didn't know that at the time, but I was already kind of, I would pace around in the top tier. And he had a cell that was right there in front of the steps. So you came up the steps and you faced his cell, and then you would turn left or you turn right, depending on what you're trying to do. But you'd always see people coming in and out, tattooing out of there and stuff. They come out, they show their work, and all that stuff. So I was already kind of hanging around and peeking in at the work and stuff, especially when somebody that I knew was in there getting work done. I would come in there and I would check it out, and I'd watch for a few minutes, but then I would leave, just out of being polite, respectful. You don't need everybody crowded around you, eye fucking your work while you're trying to work, so I would take off. But finally one day he pulled up on me and he asked me that. He asked me to look out for him. And I said I would. I was like, yeah. I said, what's it all entail? And he said, well, he goes, you write me a list every week. He goes, then, I'll go to store for you. He goes, I like to eat a lot. He goes, I like to, throw spreads together. He goes, I'll look out for you, man. So I'll look out for you, look out for me, you make sure I stay out the box. And I was like, all right, sounds good. And he's like, and plus, ever somewhere down the line you want some work. He goes, well, I got you. And I'm like, yeah, we'll get back to that. We'll get back to that. But I did. I started jigging for him, and that went on for a few months. And it was during that time. By then, I was pretty much well known for drawing. I was a commissioned portrait artist by that time. And I went from drawing people's tattoo designs, letters and numbers and stuff, to birthday cards, to anniversary drawings, and then that shit, it finally went up to portraits. The first thing I ever drew, where somebody told me that I knew how to draw portraits, is I had drawn a female model out of a Smooth magazine, which is just straight TNA for men, right? That's all it is. It's just eye candy, and basically swimsuit edition, if you can call it that. But yeah, it's definitely made especially for men, probably especially incarcerated men. They literally knew just how to pose or light or drape clothing in such a way where it was just barely permissible. So anyways, I drew Vita Guerrera out of one of them, and somebody looked at the drawing that I did and they said, yo, you could do portraits, how much do you charge for a portrait? And I was like, what's a portrait? And they're like, dude, yeah, like, look. He goes, I can tell that's Vita Guerrera. He goes, you could be drawing people's kids, their wives, their moms, dead relatives. You could be charging $20, $30, $40, $50 a face, man. He goes, you need to try that. You need to get that money, get your name out there. And I was like, huh. I thought about it, and I did. I ended up finding somebody who was willing to throw me a book of stamps to draw, I think it was his daughter's face or something like that. And I did. I drew it, and I showed it to him, and he went and showed his friends, and then he came back and he brought me a bunch of pictures at like $20 a face. So I started doing those, and then I moved from there. I moved up to these big tag boards. So like 3 by 2 feet or something like that, and I would fit up to 15 faces on these things, and they would be surrounded, and whatever. It could be clouds, it could be stone archways, or just roses blooming everywhere, and you got family names that are printed on like banner that's like twisting and wrapping around and stuff. Really cool stuff. And I was getting hundreds of dollars sent to my books for these things. They were putting a lot of money in my pocket. And it was while I was doing all that, 2 black guys approached me out of the blue one day. Guys I had never talked to, had no reason to ever really fuck with, didn't owe me nothing like that. And I'll never forget them. One was his name was George, and he was a GD out of Peoria, Illinois. Called him King George III. I don't know about the third, but I know they called him King George. He had a mouthful of gold. He was one of the loudest motherfuckers in the unit. But he was one of the loudest motherfuckers in the unit because he could be, not because, they're overcompensating for something else. He was a down motherfucker, and he had like life, or just near enough to call it life. I know he had somewhere in the 30-40 year range. He didn't care. He didn't have no qualms about anything. He was a loose cannon. But I liked him. He was cool. And his celly's name was Dirty. And he was out of, I want to say Davenport, Iowa. Both these guys, they approached me one day, and they sat down at the table where I was drawing. And they were like, hey man, we think you could tattoo. And I was like, nah, man. I was like, no, I can't tattoo. And they're like, no, we think you could learn. That's what we're trying to say. We think you can learn if somebody just let you practice on them. And I was like, nah, man, my hand shakes a little too much for that. And it still does. I got a little bit of like a little tremble. It just, nerves are shot out. Too much drug use. Too many high tense situations. Looking at 30 years when you're fucking 20 years old. Shit like that. It'll do things to you. It'll do funny things to you sometimes. But yeah. They were like, nah, check it out. We're going to get everything. Like, we're going to get everything you need. We're going to get the motor, the ink, the needles, all that stuff. We'll get it all together. We'll give it to you. Give us a couple of weeks. We'll get everything you need. But you're going to have to figure out how to put it all together. We can't help you with that. So you're going to have to, you're the artist. You're the artist. Figure it out. We'll give you the way, but you got to have the will. And I'm like, all right, it sounds good. It sounds good. Anytime anybody ever approaches you in prison and they promise to put you on some kind of way or something like that, it's usually a good idea to take that with at least a couple grains of salt, because usually if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. It's very rarely that people offer up anything for nothing. They did want something from me though. They just wanted good work. And they said that to you. So we're gonna let you practice on us. Just don't forget about us when your ass gets good. Be acting fucking brand new and shit. I did end up getting good. I was there for 4.5 years, and they seen me go from trying to quit the very first piece I started. I had started from left to right, and everybody knows as a tattooist, you start from right to left, so your hand doesn't smear across the pattern, the stencil. I had started from left to right, and my hand and wrist was wiping away this word that was going all the way across his stomach. And by the time I got towards the middle, there was nothing left. And I went and I got one of the natives who came on the bus with me, who knew how to tattoo. And he came in there and he looked at it and he looked at the whole situation, and he was like, nope, I'm not finishing it. He goes, you started it, you finish it. He goes, this is something that's gonna happen, man. He goes, shit's gonna happen. What are you gonna do? You can't just quit. He goes, shit's gonna happen. He goes, people are gonna have to jump up and put their shirts on and look casual, and patterns are gonna come off. He goes, then what? He goes, freehand that shit. Don't be scared. I was like, fuck, man. I was like, fucking A's. I'm fucking this dude up. And these guys are, they're not. I was more concerned with fucking somebody up. But my client was like, you got this. Just relax, breathe. You got this. You're the artist. You drew it up. You're the one who drew it. Draw it again. Just with the tattoo gun. And that's how I ended up becoming a freehand artist, because my very first tattoo, I ended up having to freehand the whole fucking middle of it. Second piece I did, I learned real quick that you can't do these small ass little fucking Bible scripture whole paragraph in a fucking 2x2 inch square area, because that shit would just bleed together, especially if you don't know how to shape the needle and don't know how to not fucking drop the needle all the way to the hilt every time. The third piece I did, somebody had their own ink. They thought that shit was gas. They had me going over everything multiple times, saying they wanted it just a little darker. No, all that shit fell out, man. I had big old patches of just pink skin, fucking just wide open. Shit, like literally the first 3 tattoos almost made me quit. Once I got over that, and I saw that there was a lot of encouragement from everybody. They're like, you're good for a beginner. And I was happy with that at first, being good for a beginner, but then you can only get away with being good for a beginner for a couple months. That's it. After that, people, especially, you're going to start charging, and when you start charging and you step out there, like you're officially competing with everybody else now who've been doing this for years. You better be cheaper, or you better be as good as them. Well, I made sure I was as good, if not better, and I was charging the most out of everybody, and I was still getting a lot of business. But anyways, that was probably That at that point, that was years later. But still, in the beginning, it was still within the first couple of months of me tattooing. Bullet came to me, and he was like, "It's my birthday. My birthday's coming up pretty soon here. We'll just call it the weekend or whatever, right?" He's like, "My birthday's coming up on the weekend here." He goes, "I got some wine cooking because I'm gonna get fucked up." He goes, "You're gonna give me a tattoo." He goes, "And we're gonna go out with a bang." And I'm like, "Oh yeah?" I said, "You got some wine brewing and shit?" And he was like, "Yeah, man." He goes, "And I got a piece I'm drawing up right now. I'm gonna have you do it." He goes, don't tell anybody though. It's gonna be a surprise." And I'm like, "All right, cool, fuck yeah, man, I'll tattoo you." And like that was the thing to me. I was like, I was just happy that somebody that I looked up to, regardless of what I said in the beginning of the video, he was still getting paid, and he was still probably one of the better ones on the compound. Still, even with his one eyeball at that time, he had steady amount of work. He had no problems keeping work and keeping me busy and him busy. And we ate good for it too. But yeah. So he comes in. When he shows me his design, he goes, "Look, I'm gonna show this to you." He goes, "Don't tell anybody that what this is." He goes, "This still, we'll keep it on the down low." He goes, "I'm about to tell you why." He goes, "But before I do that," he goes, "I'm gonna show you something." And I'm like, "All right, cool. What do you got?" And he goes and he pulls out this little file, and he takes some stuff out, and he pulls out a newspaper clipping. And my memory is a little hazy, but all I can remember was it was coverage of his crime, and it was clearly a hate crime. It was clearly a crime that had targeted a particular ethnicity group. Need I say more? So he was in there for the real deal. And as far as he was concerned, he was one of the very few who were actually in prison for that. Everybody else were coming in, "Oh, I got busted, with a meth pipe and some bullets. So now I'm in the feds and now I'm white power." Like there's a difference of that, and there's a difference of somebody who grew up with that, was indoctrinated with it, was looking up to other generational members. It was a big deal to him when he was young, and when he went down for his crime, I'm not really sure. I can't really pretend to know a lot about it, but I have thought about it often, because I do wonder why he didn't have. He had other things on him, but apparently he didn't have the bolts on him, at least not above the neckline or something. I'm pretty sure he had some on him already. I can't be the first pair that was ever put on him. He had a bunch of other stuff already. But what it was a gas mask. It was a skull gas mask, and it had 2 bolts down on the side. And the design was badass. I'll be honest. I liked it. I was stoked to fucking do it. I was stoked to do it on him. I was stoked that it was going to be a neck piece that everybody was going to see. And it was the fact that the guy that I jigged for was letting me tattoo him. So to everybody else, it was like the highest cosign that I could get, right? As a newly aspiring tattoo artist, to get the the OG veteran to let his his disciple tattoo him. It was definitely a bit of a cosign. It was kind of a big deal, and that's all I was really looking forward to. But then he started to explain the situation, and he said, "Look," he goes, "when I do this," he's like, shit's gonna go down." He said, "My people are gonna have a problem with this." He goes, and by that I mean, you know, all the guys in the unit, because they're all going to have a problem with it. They're probably going to have a problem with your people. Because you're going to want to make sure that your people are aware of what's going on. And I was like, all right, I said, talk to me then. What do I need to be looking out for here? And he said, these right here, and he pointed at the bolts. He said, these are an issue. He goes, these are only supposed to be put on me by another member. And he goes, but I wouldn't let any of these, not one of these guys here touch me. He goes, the fact that I'm having you do it, he says, is a direct slap. Damn. He said, it's a direct slap in their face. He says, and you're going to be at the center of it. He goes, is that something you're willing to do? He goes, if not, he goes, don't worry about it. He goes, we'll just do it without it. We'll do it without the bolts. Tell me now. And I was like, I'm like, this is the first of a lot of fucking dumb, crazy choices that I would end up making just because I wanted to see what happened. That's it. I wanted to see what would happen. And it was ultimately my call. This was my business. This was my craft. I am being paid to, provide services for somebody. And I have never, in any of the other 100 tattoos that I've done, been approached by another fucking race or gang because of what this person got put on him. The only people that will happen with are the white boys. And like I said, this wouldn't have been possible, and nor would I attempt to do it ever again anywhere else other than at that place at that time. And like I said, it was my first joint. I technically didn't know any better, but I knew something would happen. I knew that it would be an issue. And the night came, we set up, we told everybody, you're not to come in. This is my first tattoo. I don't need people coming in, crowding around, stressing me out. Everybody understood. Everybody knew that they would wait until the reveal and when it was done. We went in there, we stepped in, we disappeared for a couple of hours. And as soon as it was done, I had just enough time to catch the move and go work out with my bros out at the gym, at the weight pile. After I left, the person that he was going to be drinking with was a Sereno out of Utah. His name was, I want to say Chiba. I swear to God, it was Chiba, or it was Chibo, or Cheetah, like the fucking fast-ass cat. But he'd only been there like a couple of days, and you can already know this guy's a fucking crash dummy. When he's only been there for a couple of days and he's already, making plans to get drunk with another race in the 10-man. We were all in the 10-man at the time. He was in my 10-man. And, like this guy's fucking paperwork hadn't even cleared yet with the homies. And he was already putting in on the batch and shit. Looking forward to getting drunk. But he didn't know that Bullet was going to crash out that night. And I left. Right, I went to go lift weights. They went up there and they got drunk in the 10-man, and for whatever reason, I still don't know what exactly kicked it off. But Bullet beat up Chiba. We'll just stick with Chiba. That's what it's the first thing that my mind remembers is Chiba. So that's Chiba it is. But Bullet, even though he was pushing maybe 50 years old, he was fucking cut. He was cut up like a bag of Dunseith dope. I'm not even kidding. All he did was push-ups, dips, and pull-ups. He didn't even mess with the weights. He didn't depend on anybody else. He worked out by himself. He stuck to himself. He tattooed and he worked unicorn. That was it. But so yeah, I mean, yeah, you wouldn't know it. You actually would not know it. You'd look at him and you'd think he was an old man because like his neck skin started drooping a little bit and stuff, and his arms, his hands, they all look old. But when he came out of that shirt, it was like, whoa, this motherfucker, he's got something under the hood there. So he gets into it with the Sereno, and they had porcelain toilets in that 10-man still, and he busted one of the porcelain toilets with Chiba's head. When I came in, the one of the windows to the 10-man was shattered. It was spider webbed. It was like it had blood on it. The one of the toilets, the bathroom had flooded with water and stuff. One of the toilets just snapped clean in half, and there was blood everywhere. It literally looked like a fucking murder scene. I honestly don't know if that dude survived that or not, because we went on lockdown right after this, and we don't get updates on shit like that. But after he beat this Sereno's ass in the 10-man, he came out and he went hunting. He went hunting for Mike and Russell. And I guess he had trouble catching them. I wasn't there for it, and so I had to go off what other people said. But apparently Mike was running from him. Mike was on top tier trying to stay as far away from him as possible. He couldn't find Russell because Russell was in the shower, and it was like one of the few times that Russell didn't go to the shower and back in fucking combat boots. Because when I came back, when they called the move, we came walking back in, and when I came walking into the unit, everybody was dead silent, stock still, looking up at, like right up above me, right? And I come in, and I come up, and I turn around, and I look, and I see Bullet. He's standing there. He's got his shirt off. He looks wild as fuck. He looks drunk. He was trying to throw Mike over the top tier. I remember now. And we had a CO there. Her name was, I don't remember her name, but they called her Chick Flair because of how blonde her hair was and how orange her tan was. And every time she came into the unit, everybody would go, woo! And they'd say, Chick Flair, yeah! Oh, she fucking hated it, man. She was nice. She was actually cool. She was for us, really. She was for the natives. But, she was pro-convict, and everybody liked her, but she's still a CO. People are still going to talk shit, they're still going to take shots, and you still got to have thick skin. And they've made her cry, and when they made her cry, she went and shook down half the fucking unit. She was the plane, but for the most part, she didn't deserve it. She really didn't. She was actually cool. She told us sex offenders were on the yard, who to look out for and stuff. But I remember now, that's crazy. I remember her, I was looking at her, and she was screaming at Bullet to let Mike go, and he had Mike in a chokehold, and he was like bouncing him off the fucking top rail, and Mike was just like holding on for dear life, and Chick Flair was like, let him go, and he was like standing there, and he's literally choking him one-handed, and he's like, let him go, bitch, let him go. And she started to like try to throw him off the top tier, and everybody else came running in, and I remember looking around, and I seen Russ, and Russ was standing there with like some shit in his arms and a towel, and he had flip-flops on, and he just looked super worried, right? And I come to find out that before he got a hold of Mike, he had went to Russ's room, pissed on his bed, and then came out and was like, where are you at? Get your bitch ass out here. Like straight up called these dudes out, because they came out, and then, when they seen his new tattoo and stuff, they're like, hold on a second, man, did you really did you really get those just now? Did you really have this dude put that on you? And he's like, yeah, I did. What the fuck you want to do about it, huh? Who the fuck are you? What the fuck are you here for? You know, and like started really bowing up on these guys. And they scattered. And he beat the shit out of one of them, chased Mike down, almost threw him off the top tier, beat the shit out of the Sereno. All this shit was going on in Chick Flair's watch, and she didn't know about none of it until we finally came walking back in. It was nuts. That's how he went to the shoe. We went on lockdown and we came back out. The white boys, they did. They wanted to have a powwow with the natives. They wanted to have a little get together. And they, I wasn't the shot caller at the time. We had another guy. His name was Boyd. Big Boyd, something like that. He came from Terre Haute, USP. And to us, we were just happy we had somebody who had the reins that came from a USP. You know, we didn't know nothing about whether or not Terre Haute was, you know, a what do they call it? A PC yard or not. And even if it was a PC yard, we still had to assume that shit was realer there than it was in our podunk ass fucking FCI, right? It's only safe to assume. So he had the yard. He definitely carried himself like somebody who'd been to the pen, you know, respectfully, but didn't take no bullshit. Said exactly what he meant. But he wasn't as stand up as we really thought. We found out later on. That's a different story for a different day. But he pulls me up and he says, all right, talk to me. Says, what's going on here? And I was like, hey, man, these guys, they got an issue. Because I was paid to do some work on this bro, on this white dude. I goes, it was political. I said, some bolts. And Boyd, he was like, some bolts? He's like, you put some bolts on somebody? I was like, yeah. He's like, damn, crazy. He's like, all right, what do you want to do? I was like, I mean, if they got a problem with it, I was like, the way I see it, man, I said, I put political shit on everybody else. I said, they all pay me. I do it. Why was this any different? And he's like, all right. He goes, let's go see them. Let's go see what they're talking about. So they approached. And they're like, yeah, man, you know, we want to holler at your guy. We need to talk about, you know, what happened. And Boyd was sitting there looking at them, and he's like, all right. He goes, let me hear you out. He's like, what do you guys got? He's like, yeah, he put some tattoos on somebody, and he really shouldn't have. And he's like, whoa, what do you mean he shouldn't have? He's like, well, they weren't for him. It should have been a white boy that did it, this and that. He's like, well, why didn't it? He goes, why didn't one of you do it? And they're like, well, we didn't know because he didn't come to us. And they were like, well, then, so he chose my guy? They're like, well, yeah. And they looked at me and he goes, he pay you to do the work? And I said, yeah. He goes, did you do the work? And I said, yeah, I did. And he looked back at him, he's like, I'm not seeing the issue here. And once he said that, I was like, fuck yeah. Yeah, this dude's got my back, because if he's got my back, then the rest of the bros got my back, and it's just on them whether or not they want to try to stand on it when they clearly see we don't give a fuck. You know, we don't. And they were like, all right, it's cool. We understand. Don't worry about it. You know, and that was it. Everybody parted off. But Russell did end up pulling me up later on. And he was like, you got that. He was like, you got that off. He goes, but look, man, he was on some real shit. He goes, this is just coming from man to man. He goes, you know, I do respect you. I do like you. He's like, but if you go somewhere else, if you go to a pen, he goes, and if something like that happens again, he's like, don't do it. He goes, I'm telling you right now. He goes, because if they go somewhere else where they are willing to stand on it, You know, because none of these guys here were willing to stand on it. And he goes, they will. He goes, and your guys, he goes, your people, they might not, they might not back you. He goes, and either they'll get rid of you or you guys are going to crash. He goes, and that's going to be on you. And I'm like, I hear you, man. I was like, I hear you. And that was that. That was pretty much all there was to it. That definitely caused a few wrinkles. You do some crazy shit like that, you want to get involved in gang politics. I mean, you got to be dumb for one, crazy for another, and willing to fight. Least of all.